Tina Bailey, a 24-year-old waitress, was juggling her job at the upscale La Bernard restaurant with her dream of earning a master's degree in art history at Columbia University. Her life was a relentless grind, days spent studying priceless masterpieces, nights serving overpriced meals to the elite. But tonight, everything was about to change forever. During the dinner rush at La Bernard, her manager, Marcus, pulled her aside, his face a mix of excitement and dread. "Tina, I need you to handle the Rothschild room tonight," he said, referring to the restaurant's most exclusive private dining space. VIP client, extremely high profile, everything has to be perfect. Tina nodded, adjusting her uniform, though her stomach churned. She had a paper on Renaissance art authentication due tomorrow, and she hadn't even started. The Rothschild room was a masterpiece in itself. Like a miniature museum, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over mahogany walls adorned with original oil paintings. Likely worth more than most people's homes. Tina double-checked the table settings for 4, though the room could seat 12. Through a partially open door, she glimpsed 3 men in tailored suits. But it was the 4th who stopped her cold. Harrison Cox, one of the world's most renowned billionaires, known for his private art collection housed in a museum-quality facility few had ever seen. In his early 50s, Cox exuded authority, his silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes hinting at a man who missed nothing. As Tina entered with her practiced smile, she introduced herself. "Good evening, gentlemen, I'm Tina, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Cox looked up from a leather portfolio, his gaze making her falter for a moment. "Thank you, Tina," he said, his voice polished yet warm. "We'll be discussing business during dinner, so we may need extra time between courses." Tina nodded, serving the first course, but the tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't a casual dinner. Something monumental was unfolding. While pouring wine, Tina caught snippets of their conversation. Words like provenance and authentication stood out, terms she lived and breathed in her studies. During the second course, one of the men, a clear art dealer, opened a climate-controlled case and carefully lifted out an ancient manuscript. From across the room, Tina could see its beauty, gold-illuminated letters, deep blues, a medieval masterpiece that made her heart race. "Gentlemen," the dealer said with pride, "I present the Codex Arius of St. Emorum." Tina nearly dropped her tray. The Codex Arius, a 9th century illuminated gospel book, had vanished from a German monastery during World War II. If authentic, it was priceless. The dealer continued, "The asking price is $100 million. Cox leaned in, studying the manuscript with the intensity of a man who'd spent decades collecting rare artifacts. As the dealer moved it closer, Tina got her first clear view. What she saw chilled her to the bone. The manuscript was stunning, gold leaf shimmering, composition flawless. To most, it would seem authentic, but Tina wasn't most people. She was the granddaughter of Dr. Edmund Bailey, a leading expert on medieval manuscripts until his career was ruined by Victor Clave, a forger so skilled his fakes fooled museums and collectors alike. Her grandfather had spent his final decade obsessed with Clave, teaching Tina to spot the subtle details others missed: the overly uniform gold leaf, the too vibrant blues from modern pigments, the unnaturally perfect calligraphy. Staring at the manuscript, Tina saw Clave's handiwork. The gold leaf was too smooth, lacking the slight imperfections of medieval artisans. The blue ink was too vivid, not the muted ultramarine of the 9th century. The calligraphy was flawless, too precise for a human hand from that era. This was a forgery, and Cox was about to spend $100 million on it. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Tina, when you know something's wrong, you have a duty to speak up, no matter the cost." But the cost was steep. She was just a waitress, facing the most powerful players in the art world. Speaking out could cost her job, her reputation, or worse. Cox reached for his pen, poised to sign what she assumed was the purchase agreement. Tina couldn't stay silent. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "Sir." All 4 men looked up, startled and annoyed. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she continued, her voice trembling, "but I believe that manuscript is a forgery." The room fell silent. One dealer laughed outright, but Cox raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes locked on Tina. "Your name?" he asked, his tone calm but sharp. "Tina Bailey, sir. And what makes you think you're qualified to authenticate a medieval manuscript?" "Ms. Bailey?" Taking a deep breath, Tina summoned her courage. "My grandfather was Dr. Edmund Bailey, a leading expert on medieval manuscripts until Victor Clave destroyed his reputation with forgeries like this one." A flicker of recognition crossed Cox's face. Dr. Bailey, I recall his work. He made bold claims about forgeries in the art world. Claims dismissed for lack of proof. He was right, Tina said, her voice steadier. And he taught me to recognize Clove's techniques. I can show you. Cox studied her for a long moment. Then nodded. Show me. With shaking hands, Tina pointed out the flaws. The overly perfect gold leaf. The modern pigments. The mechanical precision of the lettering. Cox listened, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. The dealers grew agitated, but Cox asked Tina to step into the hallway while he conferred with them. Outside, Tina's heart raced, certain she'd just thrown away her job. But at least she'd tried to stop a massive fraud. Tina stood in the dimly lit hallway outside the Rothschild room, her pulse racing as she leaned against the polished wood paneling. The muffled voices of Harrison Cox and the art dealers seeped through the door. Their tones sharp and heated. She clutched her apron, her mind spiraling. Had she just ruined her life? Speaking out about the forgery was reckless, a waitress accusing experts in front of a billionaire. She could already imagine Marcus's fury, the inevitable firing, and the crushing weight of her student loans piling up without a job. Yet, her grandfather's words anchored her. The truth is worth any price. Tina, she'd done what he would have wanted. But the consequences loomed like a storm. After what felt like an eternity, though the clock on the wall showed only 20 minutes, the door opened. Harrison Cox stepped out alone. His expression unreadable. The dealers were nowhere in sight. They've left, he said simply, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made Tina's stomach twist. I've postponed the purchase pending further authentication. Tina's breath caught. Postponed? Did that mean he believed her? Or was he just humoring her to avoid a scene? I'm sorry if I overstepped. Mr. Cox, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it wasn't my place. Cox's eyes softened, though his face remained impassive. Ms. Bailey, if you're right, you've just saved me from a $100 million mistake. If you're wrong, I've lost the chance to own a priceless artifact. Either way, I need to know the truth. He paused, studying her as if weighing her very soul. I'm arranging for the manuscript to be examined by experts who specialize in detecting forgeries. And I want you there when they do it. Tina blinked, stunned. Me? But I'm just a graduate student. Cox's lips curved into a faint smile. You're the granddaughter of Dr. Edmund Bailey, and you've just demonstrated knowledge that 3 so-called experts missed. I want your eyes on this examination. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, her mind reeling. The weight of what was happening settled over her like a heavy cloak. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was being pulled into a world of high stakes, where her knowledge could either vindicate her grandfather's legacy or expose her as a fraud. 3 days later, Tina found herself in a state-of-the-art laboratory at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The sterile room hummed with the quiet intensity of cutting-edge equipment, spectrometers, microscopes, and carbon dating machines. Experts in white coats moved with precision, their faces focused as they subjected the Codex Aureus to a battery of tests. Tina stood beside Cox, who watched the process with the same razor-sharp focus he'd shown at dinner. The air was thick with anticipation, and Tina felt like an imposter in her borrowed blazer, surrounded by professionals with decades of experience. Yet, Cox had insisted she be there, and that fact alone kept her from bolting. Dr. Nora Parton, the museum's chief conservator, led the team, a woman in her late 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor. She exuded authority as she directed the analysis. We've completed the initial tests, she announced after 6 grueling hours. The parchment dates to the 9th century, which aligns with the Codex Aureus's historical record. Tina's heart sank. Had she been wrong? But Dr. Parton continued, her tone shifting. However, the inks show traces of modern synthetic compounds, pigments that didn't exist in the medieval period. Tina's pulse quickened. Dr. Parton turned to her, holding a high-resolution photograph of the manuscript's calligraphy. Ms. Bailey, you mentioned the letter formations. Could you walk me through what you noticed again? Tina stepped forward, her nerves steadying as she pointed to the enlarged image. The calligraphy is too precise, she explained, her voice gaining confidence. Medieval scribes, even the most skilled, had natural variations in their work, slight tilts in letters, uneven strokes from quill pens. This script is mechanically perfect, as if it were produced with modern tools. Victor Clove, the forger, was known for this flaw. He couldn't resist creating an idealized version of medieval writing. Dr. Parton's eyes widened slightly, and she leaned closer to the photograph, adjusting her glasses. Extraordinary, she murmured. I've been in this field for 20 years. And I overlooked these details. This forger was brilliant, terrifyingly so. Cox, silent until now, turned to Tina. You're certain this is Clove's work? She met his gaze, her grandfather's training grounding her. I'd stake my life on it. Dr. Pardon nodded. We'll need further tests to confirm. But based on what we've seen, Ms. Bailey's observations are compelling. This appears to be a highly sophisticated forgery. Cox's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of respect. It seems I owe you a considerable debt. Ms. Bailey. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Mr. Cox, I just couldn't let you be deceived. A week later, the final authentication results arrived, confirming Tina's suspicions. The Codex Arius was indeed a Clove forgery. So expertly crafted it had fooled 3 renowned authenticators and nearly duped one of the world's savviest collectors. Cox called Tina personally to share the news. Ms. Bailey, I'd like to meet with you tomorrow afternoon at my office. I have a proposition for you. Tina's mind raced. A proposition? From Harrison Cox? She barely slept that night, torn between excitement and dread. What could a billionaire possibly want from her? The next day, Tina stepped into Cox's office on the top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The space was a gallery of masterpieces, a Monet water lily painting, a Picasso sketch, a Van Gogh drawing that took her breath away. This wasn't an office, it was a shrine to art. Cox stood by a window overlooking the city, his presence as commanding as ever. Impressive, isn't it? He said, noticing her awe. But this is just the overflow. My main collection is in Connecticut. Tina could only nod, still processing the surreal moment. Ms. Bailey, Tina, Cox began. I want to offer you a job. Tina froze. A job? Cox smiled faintly. I need a curator for my collection, someone with your eye for detail. Your knowledge of authentication, your ability to see what others miss. Tina's head spun. Mr. Cox, I'm flattered, but I'm still in graduate school. I don't have the credentials. Cox waved a hand dismissively. You have something rarer than credentials, instinct. Your grandfather was discredited, but he was right about Clove, wasn't he? Tina nodded, her throat tight. Yes, he was. Cox's voice grew intense. I've done some research on Victor Clove since our dinner. Your grandfather wasn't alone in suspecting him. Whispers have circulated in the art world for years. But no one could prove anything. Clove was too good, too careful. He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm offering you a role as curator and authentication specialist for the Cox collection. A starting salary of $100, plus benefits. I'll pay off your student loans and fund your graduate degree. Tina's jaw dropped. $100? For a graduate student scraping by on tips? It was unthinkable. There's more. Cox continued. I want to establish the Dr. Edmund Bailey Foundation for Art Authentication. With you as its first director. Its mission will be to train experts to combat forgeries and protect the art world's integrity. Tears pricked Tina's eyes. Her grandfather had died believing he'd failed. His reputation in tatters. The idea of honoring his legacy with a foundation was beyond her wildest dreams. Mr. Cox, I don't know what to say. He smiled. Say yes. Tina, help me ensure no one like Clove can undermine the art world again. With a trembling voice, she whispered, yes, absolutely yes. Tina Bailey's life transformed overnight. She left her waitressing job at La Bernard, trading the chaos of dinner rushes for a world of rare artifacts and high stakes. Harrison Cox had arranged for her to move into a sleek apartment near his Connecticut facility. A far cry from the cramped studio she'd shared with a roommate in Brooklyn. The Cox collection was a revelation, thousands of pieces spanning centuries. From ancient Egyptian sculptures to Renaissance paintings, all housed in a climate-controlled fortress that rivaled the world's finest museums. Tina felt like she'd stepped into a dream, but the weight of her new role as curator and authentication specialist pressed heavily on her. Could she live up to Cox's expectations? Could she honor her grandfather's legacy? Her first task was daunting. Examine every piece in the Cox collection for potential forgeries. The work was meticulous, requiring hours under magnifying glasses, cross-referencing historical records, and using advanced tools like infrared reflectography to detect anomalies. Tina approached it with a mix of reverence and determination. Channeling her grandfather's teachings, she remembered his late-night lessons at their kitchen table, his weathered hands pointing out subtle flaws in manuscript reproductions. Look for the human touch. Tina, he'd said, forgeries lack soul. Now, armed with his wisdom and modern technology, she combed through the collection, Piece by piece. Weeks turned into months, and Tina's confidence grew. She identified 3 forgeries among the 2,000 plus artifacts, minor pieces, valued at perhaps $2 million combined. But still a testament to Victor Klov's insidious reach. When she presented her findings to Cox in his Connecticut office, he leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of relief and concern. 3 out of over 2,000, he said, rubbing his chin. Better than I feared, but it proves Klov's work is everywhere. Tina nodded. These are small compared to the Codex Arius, but they show how prolific he was. My grandfather always said Klov's forgeries were like a virus in the art world. Cox's eyes gleamed with resolve. Then we'll root them out. Starting with the Dr. Edmund Bailey Foundation. The foundation's launch was a spectacle. A gala that drew art historians, curators, and collectors from across the globe. Held in a grand Manhattan ballroom. The event glittered with chandeliers and champagne. But its heart was Tina's speech. Standing at the podium, she felt the weight of her grandfather's memory. Dr. Edmund Bailey dedicated his life to protecting the integrity of art. She began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. When we authenticate a work, we're not just verifying its value. We're preserving history, the stories, the cultures, the people behind each piece. Forgers like Victor Klov's don't just steal money, they steal our connection to the past. The audience erupted in applause. And Tina felt a surge of pride. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a guardian of history. As the gala wound down, an elderly man approached her. His steps slow and deliberate. His tailored suit couldn't hide the frailty of age or the pallor of illness. Ms. Bailey, he said, his voice thick with an Eastern European accent. I wanted to speak with you about your grandfather. Tina's heart skipped a beat. Did you know him? The man's eyes held a mix of sorrow and resolve. In a way, my name is Victor Klov. The room seemed to spin. This was the man who'd haunted her grandfather's final years. The forger who'd destroyed his reputation. Tina's hands clenched, but Klov raised a trembling hand. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to apologize. I'm dying. Ms. Bailey, I have months left, and I want to make amends. Tina stared, torn between anger and disbelief. Apologize? Klov's eyes glistened with tears. Your grandfather was right about me. I created forgeries, dozens of them. When he tried to expose me, I used my connections to discredit him. It's the greatest regret of my life. Tina's mind raced. This frail man was the monster who'd ruined her grandfather. Yet his remorse seemed genuine. Why tell me now? She asked. Klov sighed. Because I was young and arrogant, thinking my forgeries were art in themselves. I told myself they were beautiful enough to deserve existence. But I was wrong. I stole history, just as you said tonight. Your grandfather was the only one skilled enough to see through my work. And I destroyed him for it. I want to help you finish what he started. 2 weeks later, Klov delivered on his promise. In a discreet meeting at a quiet cafe, he handed Tina a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. These contain records of every forgery I created, he said. 47 pieces. Their locations. The collectors who own them. The experts I misled. It's all there. Tina's hands trembled as she took the materials. This was a map to Klov's empire of deceit. A chance to expose decades of fraud. Why give this to me? She asked. Klov's voice was barely a whisper. Because you're carrying your grandfather's torch. I can't undo what I did to him. But I can help you prove he was right. Back at the Cox collection, Tina and Cox pored over Klov's records. The scope was staggering. Paintings in major museums. Manuscripts in private collections. Sculptures in corporate lobbies. Some of these owners will never admit they were fooled, Cox said, shaking his head. But we have to try. Tina agreed. I want to contact every owner. Every museum. They deserve the truth. And I want the world to know my grandfather was right all along. Cox placed a hand on her shoulder. A rare gesture of warmth. We'll do it together. The foundation will lead the charge. The revelation of Klov's confession sent shockwaves through the art world. Museums quietly pulled pieces for re-authentication. Collectors faced the humbling reality that their treasures were fakes. Headlines blared. Art world rocked by forgery scandal. Tina's name became synonymous with truth. Her grandfather's legacy restored. Art history texts were updated to credit Dr. Edmund Bailey's pioneering work in forgery detection. His techniques, once dismissed as paranoia, became standard in authentication labs worldwide. Tina felt a bittersweet triumph. Her grandfather had died believing he'd failed. But now his name was celebrated. As the dust settled, Tina found herself invited to speak at an international conference on art authentication. The invitation felt like a milestone, a chance to cement her place in the field. She prepared tirelessly, crafting a speech that wove her grandfather's story with her own. Standing before a sea of experts, she felt a surge of purpose. My grandfather taught me that the truth always surfaces, no matter how deeply it's buried, she said. He believed authenticating art was about more than value, it was about protecting our shared history. Forgers don't just deceive collectors, they erase the stories of those who came before us. The audience rose in a standing ovation, and Tina knew she'd found her calling. After her speech at the International Conference on Art Authentication, Tina Bailey lingered in the Grand Hall, the echoes of applause still ringing in her ears. The event had drawn hundreds of experts, all eager to discuss the fallout from Victor Klov's confessions. Tina felt a profound sense of fulfillment, but also a quiet exhaustion. The past year had been a whirlwind, uncovering forgeries, launching the foundation, restoring her grandfather's name. As she gathered her notes, a young woman approached, her eyes wide with admiration. She was in her early 20s, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a notebook clutched in her hands. Ms. Bailey, she said hesitantly, I'm a graduate student working on my thesis about Renaissance forgeries. Your speech was incredible. Does the Bailey Foundation offer internships? Tina smiled, seeing a reflection of her former self in the young woman's eager expression. Just 2 years ago, she'd been in the same position, passionate about art history but drowning in doubt about her future. We do, Tina replied warmly, and we'd love to have someone with your passion on board. Send me your resume, and let's set up a meeting. The student's face lit up like a canvas under gallery lights. Thank you so much. This means everything to me. As she walked away, Tina realized this was the true gift of her journey, not the prestige or the salary, but the chance to mentor the next generation, to pass on the torch her grandfather had given her. It was a legacy that extended beyond exposing forgeries. It was about inspiring others to fight for truth in a world full of deceptions. In the months that followed, the Dr. Edmund Bailey Foundation grew rapidly. Tina oversaw workshops where aspiring authenticators learned cutting-edge techniques, blending her grandfather's intuitive methods with modern science. Participants came from all corners of the globe, united by a shared mission to safeguard cultural heritage. One particularly memorable session involved a group of museum curators grappling with a suspected fake in their own collection, a 15th-century tapestry that had been acquired decades ago. Using Klov's records as a guide, Tina led them through the authentication process, revealing subtle inconsistencies in the dye composition and weave patterns. See how the colors don't fade naturally, she pointed out. Echoing her grandfather's lessons, the curator's gratitude was palpable. One even confided, "We've been blind to this for years. Your grandfather's work is saving us now." Harrison Cox remained a steadfast ally, providing funding and connections that amplified the foundation's reach. During a private dinner at his Connecticut estate, he raised a glass to Tina. "You've exceeded every expectation," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "The art world is forever changed because of you." Tina blushed, but her thoughts turned to the broader impact. Museums worldwide had adopted stricter protocols, inspired by the Bailey Foundation's guidelines. Private collectors, once wary of scrutiny, now sought out its services to verify their holdings. Even governments took notice, with several countries incorporating forgery detection into their cultural preservation laws. Tina's story had become a beacon, proving that one person's courage could ripple out to protect humanity's shared history. Yet, amidst the successes, Tina faced challenges that tested her resolve. Not everyone welcomed the revelations. Some collectors, humiliated by the exposure of their fakes, launched smear campaigns against the foundation, questioning its motives and methods. One prominent billionaire, whose prized sculpture turned out to be a Klov creation, sued for defamation. The legal battle was grueling, dragging on for months with depositions and media scrutiny. Tina spent sleepless nights poring over documents, her determination fueled by memories of her grandfather's own struggles. He never backed down, she reminded herself during the darkest moments. Cox's legal team rallied around her, and in the end, the court ruled in their favor, citing Klov's confessions as irrefutable evidence. The victory not only cleared the foundation's name but also set a precedent, making it harder for forgers to operate in the shadows. On a personal level, Tina's life blossomed in unexpected ways. She reconnected with old friends from Colombia, sharing stories of her transformation over coffee in cozy New York cafes. One evening, she met Alex, a fellow art historian who volunteered at the foundation. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, blending professional passion with personal connection. Alex understood the weight Tina carried, the emotional toll of vindicating her grandfather while navigating a high-profile career. Their relationship grew slowly, a welcome anchor in her hectic world. "You're not just fighting for art," Alex told her one night as they strolled through Central Park. "You're fighting for integrity in everything." Tina smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't known since her grandfather's passing. A year after Clove's death, Tina had attended his quiet funeral. A gesture of closure, she stood at her grandfather's graveside on a crisp autumn day. The cemetery was peaceful, leaves rustling in the breeze. She placed a bouquet of lilies on the stone, tracing the engraved name with her fingers. "Grandpa, we did it," she whispered. "Your name is honored now. The foundation is thriving, and we're training others to see what you saw." Tears streamed down her face, a mix of grief and joy. She thought back to that fateful night at Labernard, whispering warnings to a billionaire about a fake manuscript. It had been a risk that could have ended her dreams. But instead, it ignited a purpose she never imagined. As Tina drove back to Connecticut, her phone buzzed with a message from the young intern she'd met at the conference. "Just authenticated my first piece today, thanks to what you taught me," it read. Tina's heart swelled. This was the real triumph, empowering others to carry the fight forward. The art world, once riddled with unchecked deceptions, was now more vigilant, more honest. Forgers like Clove would find it harder to thrive, their illusions pierced by trained eyes and unyielding truth seekers. Tina's journey from waitress to world-renowned expert was more than a personal success story. It was a testament to the power of speaking up. In a world where fraud could masquerade as beauty, she had become a guardian, ensuring that history's true voices endured. As she looked to the future, Tina knew challenges would come, new forgers, evolving techniques, but with her grandfather's spirit guiding her, she was ready. The legacy of truth was alive, unbreakable, and eternal. An absolutely incredible story about courage, family legacy, and the power of speaking truth to power. What's your dream job? Share it in the comments below. If this story of hidden expertise, family vindication, and the courage to challenge authority moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories about finding your calling and honoring those who came before us. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next.